a hoax. This was a hoax.
No, I was impressed because, I would be like afraid that my knees would crack on the ground, but the way that she would do it is she would like almost gallop with her toes, and she was like really, really good at it. But she couldn't speak sentences, right? So some people are like really, really, really good at some things you wouldn't expect, right? Because they're in an environment that would kind of encourage the development of such skills. But yeah, she couldn't.
I'm still getting these advertisements for super absorbent.
Absorbent what? Tampons?
No,
Sponges.
like the diapers, basically adult diapers.
Ah, adult diapers.
I don't need adult diapers, YouTube. Okay, I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Hmm.
I'm like offended. Should I be offended?
Maybe it's one of those things where like they're just starting to get you used to the brand now. So when it comes time for you to get adult diapers, you already have a
You know what? I think we're out of sound here. Hold on. Let me. I should have seen that anyway. Okay.
out of sound. That's
This is why I check, Kevin.
That means they didn't hear my story about
No, that's good, actually.
the dog.
What? All right, there we go.
Anyway,
We had a lot of reverb here.
don't neglect your baby.
There we go. I actually think we should maybe do the reverb all the time. Would that be too annoying?
Have you tried the app thing that
I actually think we should maybe do the reverb all the time.
the voice disruptor?
I can't listen to both of us. Now it's like there's like triple reverb.
I know. Like, have you done the thing where it will delay what you just said just a little bit and replay it into your ear, and it disrupts your ability to speak, and it causes you to stutter?
I think everyone would benefit if I had lost my ability to speak.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Or did you ever see the King's speech?
Did I ever see it?
Yeah. Where like the king had, or whoever it was, he had a really bad stutter, and what they did was they like played music or something into his ear where it kind of, they were playing with this effect. And so they were able to get over his stutter by making it so that he couldn't listen to his own voice, because that was causing him to like hesitate every couple of seconds.
I don't need music in my ear. I need somebody to drop some knowledge in my ear.
Knowledge.
Some knowledge.
Are we switching sides?
This stuff. Would you have a preferred side?
No. I'm okay.
You're okay?
Fine.
You're okay? I'm okay?
Yeah.
Oh, we're officially in lockdown now.
What does that mean?
That means lockdown. Like I just read that that whole Bay Area is like.
Huh.
Yeah. So stay 6 feet away.
Okay.
We get in trouble here.
Same.
But actually, we've switched sides, but we've also switched sides in the video. So we're the same side on the video as we were before.
Oh. Did you wait? You reversed it?
No, it's just I'm saying, like, if we do this, look, this, now we're on the opposite sides that we were on. But now that we go back here, now we're on the different side.
Yeah,
the
that's
same side as where we were.
That's what switching sides means, right?
No, but I'm saying, like, so we went from right to left, or left to right,
Uh-huh.
right? And then, but on the video, it's opposite. So we're actually, in the video, that's like an alternative universe where it's like Bizarro World. You know what I'm saying?
What? That's like the reverse
That's
mirror,
a reverse
right?
image
Uh-huh.
of where we. Is it though? Wait.
Yeah.
If I
Because
turn around
normally,
like this.
no, normally I would be waving my right hand and it would be on this side, but it's not. Okay, what's your
You
point?
see what I'm saying?
Okay, all right, yeah. That's,
Alternate universe.
Why are we talking about alternate universe?
Oh. I rode today, so my legs are very, very tight in my back too. Jiu-Jitsu as life, Kevin. Tell us about it. Kick some knowledge in our ear about Jiu-Jitsu as life.
Jiu-Jitsu isn't life.
It is life.
Jiu-Jitsu
as a way of life. I'm actually learning about all sorts of like ancient Greek philosophies as a way of life, and so I would like to hear you talk about how Jiu-Jitsu can be a way of life. How has it been a way of life for you, Kevin? Or has it been?
I don't think it is. Jiu-Jitsu is Jiu-Jitsu. Sometimes an armbar is Jiu-Jitsu. Sometimes an armbar is not Jiu-Jitsu.
An armbar is always Jiu-Jitsu unless it's judo. Or unless you're doing wrestling, which is a totally different thing. Or a bar, they call it a bar arm. They don't call it an arm bar. They do, it's true, I'm not making that up.
Well, let me do this. And then I can preach.
Oh, preach on, preacher. Amen. Can I get an amen times 10? Oh.
All right, so the starting question that I had in terms of why, I won't get into it. Let's start with the question. If you had a group of students, let's say you were the black belt, you had 2 brown belts, 3 purple belts, 4 blue belts, 5 white belts.
Do I have to do math?
Right, a pyramid of students. You're at the top. Assuming that, let's say the amount of knowledge gained per like training session, right? If a white belt rolls with a black belt, gains more knowledge than a white belt rolls with a brown belt, gains more knowledge than if you roll with a pro belt, et cetera, right? Like higher belts have higher value in terms of ability to transfer knowledge to a student. So if I wanted to get everyone the best, the fastest, would it be better for the black belt to roll with all the white belts and then all the blue belts and all the brown belts? Or would it be better for the top people to roll with the top people and then sort of trickle its way down, right? As far as like a technique, right? Assuming, we'll get into the other parts, right? But do you think if you had to teach or if you had to get, like transfer the most of your knowledge the fastest to the most people, is it better for you to roll with a select group of people who then roll with the people who know the less, or is it better to directly roll with those like white belts? And why?
Am I required to accept all of the premises of your argument?
Yeah, for this one, we have to make a lot of assumptions and simplifications, but basically, yeah, you have to make these assumptions and just go with it. Starting with, a lot of white belts, a couple less blue belts, a couple less purple belts, a couple less brown belts. Trickle down jiu-jitsu, or are you giving stimulus checks directly to the white belts?
Now, but I could mix it up, right? Like I could have a situation where I have the white belts rolling more with the blue belts and purple belts.
Yeah. Or would you make rules like the white belts couldn't roll together ever? Or white belts could only roll with purple belts and above? Or because there's more blue belts, like, they have more access to blue belts, but they gain less per roll from the blue belts as far as knowledge is transferred. Assuming that that's how it works, which is another conversation entirely.
I think that the best method, which is kind of the real world method, is that you should roll with the more variety you have in terms of skill, kind of I don't want to say the better, but like I think there is value for having white belts roll with each other. Mm-hmm. A minimal value, but value.
Value, yes.
Especially as time goes by and they get better. I think it's important that they roll with each other and feel the difference, right?
Yeah.
And also that the white belts that have been around for a little while are rolling with the brand new white belts who maybe don't know anything.
Mm-hmm. That's important.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can see some improvement, because if you just roll with, if you're a white belt and you roll with black belts all the time,
yeah,
you will never feel improvement. But not only that, but you will never actually get,
your defense will get pretty good, I think. If you study and attempt to get better.
And it also depends on whether the black belt lets you do things, right? If the black belt just comes and smashes you all the time, you're going to get better at getting smashed.
Ideally, let's say both people are working for mutual benefit, and if you roll with a black belt, he'll teach you something. Ideally, or you will learn something.
Are we just rolling, or are we teaching? Can I
can
stop and say to somebody, hey, you should do this or that, or you did this wrong?
Just across time interactions. You train with someone, you roll with someone, spar with someone, whatever.
In my own personal experience, I always learned the most from kind of the belts that were in between. So if I was a white belt, I learned the most from blue belt.
Yeah.
There was always, you would learn the techniques from the black belts for the most part, or whatever. Whoever the person who was teaching. But in terms of all the little things,
yeah,
that maybe don't always get communicated in technical instruction.
Yeah.
I learned a tremendous amount from the higher belts, the higher intermediate belts, who were willing to kind of show me things off the cuff, informally. But I think there has to be a mix.
For So you think it's somewhere in between trickle down and stimulus check?
I mean, I've seen many instances where somebody, does private lessons with, the black belt. That's the only thing they ever do. And they almost always get just wrecked when they go into the general population,
But does that mean they're bad, or does it mean that they're...
I'm just saying it's a less efficient way to learn. I mean, you think, hey, if I just do this with this great black belt, that's somehow going to be better for me.
Sure, but most people, if they only study under a private guy, generally, I would say that they're training to get better at self-defense. So that the jiu-jitsu that they learn would work against someone who doesn't know anything, but if you go after training only privates, you don't have any experience as far as how jiu-jitsu people roll, which is going to be different than just...
Well, I agree that that's true, but I think that one of the keys, no matter what kind of jiu-jitsu you're trying to learn, is dealing with people who are athletic, whether that's some combination of strength or flexibility or aggressive, but not skillful.
Yeah.
You have to learn that. That is, when you watch videos of people who come in off the street and the black belt who's there, wrecks them.
Yeah.
The reason why is because that black belt is not just training with people who have great technique.
Well,
because the person who is very athletic and aggressive and strong, you have to learn how to deal with that person.
I mean, yeah, but I feel like...
And they're going to do things that are not jiu-jitsu.
If you roll with brown belts, you'll be able to have a skill level. As long as you're aware that this person is going to do different stuff than a brown belt.
Yeah, but you have to learn that. You have to learn. So here, I'll give you a great example. Here's a great example.
Wait.
You could roll with you or I. And we will probably never put you in a headlock.
What?
We'll probably never put, I will probably never put somebody in a headlock. Unless I'm messing with them, unless I just want to prove a point.
Yeah.
Right? You don't know how to get out of a headlock. Right? But if I just roll with somebody, 99.99% of the time, I will never put them in a headlock.
Okay.
I'll probably also never take a crazy shot to do a double.
No,
Probably, there's a lot of things I probably would never do as a black belt. I'm going to try to be as technical as possible, and usually I'm lazy, so I just do the least amount of work as possible, because I think that's what jiu-jitsu is all about.
Sure.
Not the essence, but just kind of what it's about to me. But when you deal with these people who are just beasts, and they're they're super athletic, and they're super aggressive, that stuff is not going to help you, because why? Because they will put you in a nasty headlock and will try to squeeze your head off until it pops off. Yes. So you better be ready for that.
It's true. That actually happened to me once.
That happens, or the katakatame. I've been in a nasty, somebody, maybe a judo guy who doesn't have a great ground game.
Yeah,
but they know how to put weight down on you when they get into katakatame.
If you're a black belt,
or heisekatame.
No. If you're a black belt though, I think if you're seeking out people who haven't trained before, they're coming in, they're big, they're and you're going out of your way to train with these people. I think that's a little weird. I think
they go out of your way. I'm just saying to have that experience.
I think you should. Yes, you should be willing to roll with these people. You shouldn't shy away from these people, because they'll come in and they have value even if they don't know anything.
Yes,
right. Their
absolutely.
value is how can you deal with this chaos?
Yes.
But I wouldn't say there's no time where I'm going to be oh man, I haven't trained with someone who doesn't know any jiu-jitsu in a couple months. I need to get on that and find someone who doesn't really know how to train.
I probably don't have that kind of attitude either, but I do feel when you're talking about if you were to get into some sort of altercation, outside of here, it's comforting to know, I've been dealing with this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of this guy going crazy and doing crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm dealing with crazy stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have that, you're not going to have that, you're not going to be lost. Whereas if you're just a person who always rolls with high level people, you're going to forget about that stuff. Not to say you can't handle it, but just that.
It might catch you by surprise.
Well, and especially if you're a blue or a purple belt, there's a lot of people who I think, are excellent. They're really good. They're very talented in jiu-jitsu. But because they're only thinking about, rolling in a controlled environment like this, or they're only dealing with like a jiu-jitsu, like sport jiu-jitsu, that you lose a little bit of that ability to deal with like poor technique or no technique, but very aggressive.
I disagree.
Well,
I don't think you lose it. I mean, I think in the infrequent amount of times, at least for our academy, that a brand new person who's like really yoked out comes in, like I think that's the perfect amount, right? Less than 0, but it's not worth seeking out. Like
it's the same thing, I would say, and that's an extreme example, but when you are dealing with rolling with just the general public, right? You're rolling with the blue belts, you're rolling with the purples.
if I had to choose, I'm not going to choose.
No,
this.
I'm saying so if you're a student
Yeah.
and you're trying to get
Like a blue belt.
whatever,
Okay.
right? Like it's good to roll with these differing levels
Yeah. I
of
agree.
people because they're going to have different levels of skill, and you have to deal. And some people, very often, they will make up for their skill, the lack of skill,
Yeah.
with their, nothing wrong with it, with their athletic abilities, right? Or vice versa, I suppose, right? That would be more like me. That is not going to give you a complete kind of skill set that you need to deal with all of these types of things.
Yeah. I agree.
Ultimately, the very athletic person who is very skillful,
Yeah.
like that is something you should deal with too, right? Like
I completely agree. The only thing I disagreed with was when the premise was the person was a black belt or a brown belt. Like, I think if you're a blue belt and a purple belt, you know, it has a higher value dealing with that kind of stuff, right? But
I think, well, you are a young, in the bloom of your youth, black belt, right? Probably at almost the peak of your athletic
it's all
powers. Okay, it's autumn maybe. You know, as you get older, I think it is comforting to me to roll with a big guy.
Yeah.
And feel like, yeah, my jiu-jitsu still works.
Sure.
Against, it's good to check yourself.
Sure.
And feel, this is why I try to roll with everybody, because there is real benefit, even if I'm not quote unquote learning any technique from that person, there's real benefit from the people that are going really hard, the people that are putting a lot of weight down, the people who are just like being a little frenetic, right? You have to deal with it as you get older a little bit differently. But there is real value. I mean, this is the beauty of jiu-jitsu, right? Like jiu-jitsu is not a theoretical pursuit. We don't sit around, or maybe purely theoretical. We don't sit around and just kind of like do kata and just say like, well, this is my lethal, combination, right? You roll with people and you get a instant feedback of, what's happening.
Yeah, but like, if I had to choose between rolling with a crazy white belt and like a crazy blue belt, I'm gonna probably choose the crazy blue belt, unless like, I'm feeling somewhat altruistic or there's another reason behind it. Because like you can have crazy, but you can have crazy plus slightly better.
Yeah. But crazy's good, heavy's
crazy's good,
strong
chaos
is good.
Yeah.
It's
fun. It's a lot of fun.
It can be humbling sometimes, right? I mean, even if it's not like the person taps you, but maybe they Hulk smash their way around your guard, or they make you work. That's that's important.
Or just like someone who can make you force yourself to be calm.
Yes. And also just to I remember the last time I think that I can remember, I had a guy who was very strong, and not that huge, but very strong. And I was just messing around, and then all of a sudden, he kind of turned away I wasn't expecting, cross side, had me in, what was it, Casey Gatami? And I was like, oh man, this guy's heavy, And I'm like, I gotta really relax and breathe for a second, get my composure.
Yeah.
And I, looking at that, I say, that's a valuable, that's a good thing.
I agree. It's just the other things sometimes have more value. But, so does that mean you would focus on the white belts because you think, or is it just like you would just roll with everyone rolls with everyone equally, and that's the best way? Everyone rolls with everyone.
Well, you're naturally, if everyone's rolling with everyone, then naturally the distribution is going to be heavier towards the lower belts, rolling with more of the lower to / intermediate belts.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so if we do a line, we used to do this lineup where we would just, on Saturdays and Sundays, we'd have a lineup and everybody would just do a rotation. And, if you have one black belt, well, everyone will roll with the black belt at least once
Yeah.
if you do a full rotation, right? But then if you have 4 purple belts, people are gonna roll with them. If that's the biggest group of belts,
Yeah.
you're gonna roll with more. Everyone's gonna roll with more purple belts
Yeah.
than they would a black belt because there's only one.
But is that
So that is good.
I mean, it's easy in terms of the ability to coordinate and like pull off, but is that the best way or the fastest? I don't know. I don't know how to qualify it.
I think, that way of training, I mean, this is why maybe, now I'm looking at it and I'm saying, maybe that's not the most efficient way to learn at all, which is just like, hey, we just train, right? Even if it's, train with black belt or purple belt or whatever, but maybe the more efficient way to train is to have the black belts set up situations and have situational training and say, you're gonna start in this situation, you're gonna start here, and do it with the different belt levels. So it's not even rolling at all. Like the black belt could actually be very efficient in their teaching, or the instructor could be anybody, and say, today we're going to learn this. We're not going to roll. We're going to do this, and you're going to roll from this position.
So you are.
Well, you're going to roll, but it's going to be situational.
Sure.
Right? So
Yeah.
in that way, you kind of like, you're tailoring, you say, hey, listen, I want to see people working, the straitjacket system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're all going to work from the back. Let's go. We're just going to do boom, boom, boom. And you're not going to be able to switch until you catch the person 5 times or they escape 5 times or whatever it is.
But your pairing is going to be white belt, blue belt, white belt, purple belt, white belt, brown belt, like as many different types of pairings as you can? Or do you keep
it depends, right?
levels
Like,
together?
I think it would be easiest, like if you're introducing the technique, right? If you're just getting them introduced to it, you may want the upper belts to start with the lower belts because then it makes it easy.
Yeah.
Right, they're just able to apply it very simply because the white belt doesn't really know how to defend.
And you can set the expectation for how it
And so then it's just like, okay, yeah, boom, 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 you got it, now you understand. Now I'm going to graduate you and you're going to go with the blue belt.
They
right?
would go with the brown belt next?
Whatever, I'm just making an example, right? First you start with the white belt, and then I'm going to have you with the blue belt. And then, it's like lifting weights, right? Like you start off relatively light and work your way up.
But I would argue
At the end, maybe I get in and I defend.
But
right?
if you start with a white belt on a black belt, isn't that like deadlifting for the first time? Like
Yeah, they're not going to catch it.
But
Right? The white belt should not be able to finish the black belt.
Yeah.
So eventually, no, I'm saying the black belt would do that with the higher belts.
All right, so this brings us into the next phase of the question, right? And that was like...
That's the preliminary phase. How many phases are there?
Well, this is like the subsection of the problem, right? Because let's say we're trying to convey a technique across a group of people. I'm trying to teach how to attack a rear naked choke, right? So if I do nothing but teach rear naked chokes, right? And I'm teaching everyone rear naked chokes, everyone's got a good rear naked choke. When I choose a person to roll, like let's say I choose a white belt. When I positional spar with that person and I'm rear naked choking them, they're not getting better at rear naked chokes, they're getting better at defending the rear naked choke.
Sure.
Right? So
although they might be getting better in the sense that they're observing what you're doing to them.
They're conceptualizing it, they're kind of creating a certain expectation of what the choke is, what it should feel like, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as like their actual skill that's developing, they're going to get better, much better at defending the choke than they are going to be at what's it called?
Well, it depends, right? Like, if the black belt's just like getting it every time, they may not be getting so good at defending.
Like, if you can start to defend, it's a building block. You have something to work with.
Okay.
Right. So I started to think like the way that we teach jiu-jitsu, like I don't think is direct. Like if I want to teach you how to do an armbar, right? When I do arm bars to you and you're experiencing my jiu-jitsu, you're not...
The jiu-jitsu experience?
Like you're not picking up how to do arm bars, you're picking up how to defend the arm bar, right? Or same thing, like if I'm really, really good at defense, like if the thing that I'm great at is defending, and I'm a black belt and you're rolling with me, what's going to get really good for you is your arm bar, right? So I feel like the thing that a school tends to emphasize their teaching typically results in the students getting better at the opposite thing. So if you're a school that's really, really like, let's teach nothing but defense, you're going to be able to survive any sort of match. What's going to happen is you're going to have people who are really, really good at attacking, and they have a lot to say about how to defend.
That's an interesting take. I think that's true to a certain extent. If some people get better at counter fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question.
Like if you had to teach one person how to defend at the back, like that was your only goal.
Yeah.
Would you spend that time teaching them attacks or defenses or both?
Well, you have to teach them the attacks because that's how you get good at defending,
Uh-huh.
right? I mean, part of the things, there are many ways to get good at something, but one of the ways that I've found that you get good at something is that, like for example, your whatever defense, whatever escape you want to call it. If I try to do something that I'm used to doing and being successful with that technique, and then someone is consistently able to prevent me from doing my favorite thing, I will take notice of that, and I'm more likely to actually start thinking like, I can use that. If it's working against what I like to do so well, my first impulse is like, how do I counter what they're doing? My second impulse is like, is that a good defense, escape, counter, whatever it is? And then you start getting good at that thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you can approach it from different angles, but I think this is something that Bernardo Faria has said, right? When I remember this on one of his DVDs, he said, back when he was putting out DVDs and not just instructional videos online, he said that you can't really consider yourself an expert in anything really until you know all the defenses and the counters and the escapes, because until that happens, you can't really deal with all the things you're going to run into. And he was talking specifically about his way of passing, and he was showing, okay, here are the sweeps that you have to worry about. Here are the counterattacks like the Kimura, because he's doing the over/under thing that he does to pass. Here is the guillotine you have to worry about. Here are these 4, 5, 6 things that you have to worry about when you're doing this.
Yeah.
It's not just. He's like, you're never going to be in a situation where you will always be successful, or in just going and imposing your will. Someone will try to Kimura you. They will try, and they'll get close.
Of course.
And so, especially if you let them and you don't know what's happening, or you don't respect it, eventually the things will go poorly for you.
Yeah.
So I think like his point, is apropos here, which is just to say like, to be effective in any facet of jiu-jitsu, you have to be proficient and aware of the other side of the equation, the other person, what they are likely to do.
How do you develop this awareness? Is it through watching Bernardo
Practice,
videos?
like actually doing it.
It's doing it.
Well, it's twofold, right? Like this is how it works. Like usually we teach, in kind of a vacuum almost, right? Like everyone sits around and we like say, okay, this is the technique and this is how we do it, and everyone watches.
Yeah.
And then you pair off with your partner, and everyone does it wrong, right? At least the first time, or most people, if they haven't seen it before. And then as we go through and we say, we correct this one, now this, that, and the other, they get progressively better. And then through practice, repeated practice, day after day, year after year, they get really, really good at it.
No, it's more like you can do it on the mat, right? You train it. And you can do it in front of your coach with a person who's cooperating, right? And then you can do it like every time it comes up in class, you're doing it perfectly, right? But every time you do it while rolling, it fails spectacularly, and you don't know why, right? And then
every time.
And then 2 years pass, and you've given up on it, and then one day it works for a reason that you don't really understand, or maybe it works for a reason that you can kind of attribute to something else. But it finally just clicks, and then that's when
that happens sometimes. That's true.
That moment
there have been
of
things where I couldn't get them to work initially. It would fail spectacularly, and I said, "This is a terrible thing, and I'll never do it again. And what's the point? I'm terrible, and I'm just gonna have to go do this other thing." And then, as time goes on, you start seeing the kind of like, oh, okay, now I see what I was. it's not even that you see what you're doing wrong. Maybe you've changed in some way that allows you to do the thing that you were unable to do before.
Yeah.
Right?
It might even be something as simple as.
But that's not everything.
You can grip something now, or you know how to like stay a little bit tighter, or you know how to not let your posture break down, or just some little thing that was keeping you from being successful.
I think sometimes it can be an approach to jiu-jitsu that is incompatible with the technique that you're trying to use. So if I'm always trying to go in one direction, like I always want to get up, I always want to sweep, I'm always trying to push forward.
Yeah.
Well, then the techniques that require me to actually kind of bring the person up are not going to work for me, right? Because I'm always kind of predisposed to going in the other direction.
I feel like people forget that they're rolling with other human beings who also have like
their own
ideas
agenda and their own skills, and they know what they're doing.
You do the same thing like every time. They're gonna figure out how to.
That's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. That's why jiu-jitsu is where we are. It's why it's evolved and changed and improved.
Sometimes you just gotta do something different, even if you're just doing it because the other thing just.
You just keep spamming it until they counter it, right?
Sometimes it's nice, but I don't know. My theme of the month has been subverting expectations.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes it's nice to have that thing you've been hammering away at, getting really good at for like 3-4 months, and then one day everyone's expecting it. That person you've been rolling with, that you have beef with, you're going after that thing. They start to counter it, and then you do something else, right? And then it's like, but then like you have a new thing that you can build with. But then that person starts to adjust. So now you have two things that you could do. You could either do the original thing or do this new weird thing. But now they have to think about this weird thing because it worked before. But then that'll create the opening for the first thing. And so the second thing could just be like a
It's true.
Might he? Will he? Won't he? And you just, mix it up. Subvert expectations.
I think that's true, but that's. Sometimes it just makes sense to just plow ahead with your best thing.
Yeah.
And let them subvert expectations.
I think no matter what, you shouldn't be thinking about it. Like it should, if the idea comes, you just do it. You don't second guess yourself, right? Either you realize that you've been doing something too much or you don't. But you don't want to be like in the middle of something like, should I be doing this? It's not.
I don't know. This is a good idea.
It's usually not the mindset you want. Sometimes it's okay though.
There are two schools. Well, probably more than that, but schools of thought. And the one is that, I'm going to do what I do, and if I can get you to react and play my game, then I'm ahead, right? So you are fighting on my terms, right? And there's another school which is, hey, I'm going to be unpredictable. Yeah. You'll never know what my terms are.
But you can't be, because sometimes it's like, you can't be always unpredictable because then you can't create that expectation. Like you have to play with it a little bit. You got to be like knowledgeable of what they're expecting out of you, and then depending on how you understand them to be perceiving you, do a thing.
This is the meta. This is the anti-meta. This is, so Gary Tonin just fought. Did you know that he fought and won? Yesterday, just a day ahead.
Yesterday?
Yeah, or last night.
Or
today, actually, yeah. And he won a decision. It wasn't that close of a decision. He dominated. He clearly dominated the first 2 rounds, and then he kind of did okay in the 3rd round, but spent the last half of the round like running around. But he's a guy who's famous for, leg locks. Yeah. And, he did, I think either late 2nd round or early 3rd round, try to leg lock this guy, who was really good. This guy was like the number 3 ranked guy. Gary's number 5. He'll probably get a title shot after this. But, the expectation was, I think for a lot of people that he's going to get on your leg.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. He shot in, and then he got like half guard, and sometimes he'd go, like almost deep half into regular half. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful application of jiu-jitsu, and specifically half guard jiu-jitsu, in an MMA contest against a really good person, right?
Yeah. But then you also got the Brian Halls who were just like.
Well, at some point, you have to have something else. Like, I don't think there's ever been maybe I'm wrong. I probably shouldn't use an overstatement, but you know, people at some point will see what you're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And they're gonna formulate,
Yes.
somebody will formulate a game plan against you and might be able to like execute it.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think, I mean, Ryan Hall is a very special case. I think he's so good.
Yeah.
If he gets on your leg, he's probably gonna blow out your knee.
Sure.
But-
But there's nothing worse than having another human being decide that they want you to fail and they're going to be the cause. You know, someone who puts their whole
What
mind.
it does is it allows you to game plan against one variable, right? I mean, if I know that I'm not going to get into like a slugfest with Ryan Hall. That Ryan Hall will I mean, maybe I'm wrong. He's a smart guy. I mean,
He's a
I'm just
smart
saying.
guy.
But what people are thinking right now
Yeah.
are that they don't really need to respect him as a striker. He's not going to stand up with you. He will. I mean, if you don't really push him, he will.
Yeah.
Right? He's not going to just like flop down and like be like getting my guard. He uses his striking very strategically to get in close and tie you up, and then as he goes to the floor, you know, he gets his position that he wants.
Yep.
But you know, he's not going to like stand and bang with anybody. At least I have not seen that.
I think he would if he thought that was the best idea.
It's almost like, you know, back in the day, this is way before you were, I don't know, alive probably, but maybe not, maybe you were 5 or something, but, you know, Sakuraba versus the Gracies. You know, like he knew, especially when it came to like hoist, that like, you know, God bless him, that hoist, you know, on the ground was very dangerous. You know, I mean, he would tap you out, but Sakuraba would never let it happen.
Yeah.
You know, in the first fight anyway. So, you know, I thought he was very good strategically about, you know, preventing the match from going to the place where Hoist needed it to be in order to win. So if you're only just doing one thing all the time, and you know, the thing with Gary is that he stood, he actually would you know, he traded some shots with this guy. Enough to make the guy like respect him that, you know, if he comes in, he's gonna get punched in the face. If he comes in, he's gonna get kicked in the ribs. Right? He did that multiple times throughout the fight. Was it crazy effective? You know, no, that guy could take those shots all day long, but you know, he had to respect Gary. He knew that Gary would fire something off.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, just little things like that can change the tempo. If all you do is sit there and you're like, I'm not going to trade with you, I'm just going to try to shoot. You know, like at some point you're going to get caught.
True.
Right? Anderson Silva's going to come along or whatever.
Yeah, if that's all you do.
You know, it's like a Conor McGregor who is, you know, like very good you know, he has good jiu-jitsu from what I could see.
Sure.
But you know, he relies on that, and he should, right? Like I'm not saying he shouldn't, but like he relies on that, on his left hand so much that if you find a way, if you're either capable of taking that shot, or at least capable enough to keep the angle to a point where he can't unload the full power on you, right? You don't rush in like Josie Aldo, right? You don't rush in like these guys who just like, they just rush into the lion's den, right? You kind of, you're you know, Nate Diaz, you know, you can take a shot and you can make a pace that is going to get this, you know, you're not rushing in, then you're going to be vulnerable, right? And you're doing the same thing every time.
I think you should be able to do the same thing every time, but it is unwise to do so.
You know, like John Jones, the closest, I mean, he got sucked into something. He got sucked into a brawl with like Gustafson, and he almost lost, right? Like, I think that was foolish. He should not have gotten sucked into the brawl. Now, he's an amazing, talented person.
Wait, I can't tell if you're saying that you should stick to one strong thing and have that, like, or you just shouldn't ever.
What I'm saying is that
sometimes
if you only have one thing,
yeah,
and that's all you ever do, and you don't ever. So like Khabib, when he fought with Conor McGregor, I was actually worried for him. I mean, he was standing there for the first parts of rounds and like trading shots, and I was like, "What are you doing? You know, like you should be shooting in."
Yeah.
But he was confident because he's amazing that he could take one of Conor's shots and not get floored, right? And that.
Well, was he like trying to prove a point, or was he trying to like defy expectations, or was he?
I think that he was clipping Conor. Like, you can't tell what I'm going to do in any given moment, right? Like, I may punch him in the face.
And Conor was doing that with his weird shoulder thing that one time. The little shoulder.
Yeah, the shoulder thing. That
but
doesn't.
It's different, right?
It is a little different.
It's different.
It's a little
different thing. Oh, I had a question.
But I don't know anything about MMA. You know, what do I know? I'm just a spectator.
If I rear naked choke a horse,
Yes.
am I doing jiu-jitsu?
No, you're committing animal abuse. You
Why?
probably go to jail.
Why? It's
Because the
really
horse doesn't know you're doing jiu-jitsu. The horse is just innocently, is the horse trampling down the street? And is it like the Ralph Gracie story where he chokes out the pit bull who's attacking a child?
Hold on. So what if I see a mugger attacking a woman?
Yes.
And I jump on his back and I choke him to sleep.
Yes.
Am I doing jiu-jitsu?
Do you know jiu-jitsu? Or are you just some random person who just decides, yeah, you're doing something you're doing jiu-jitsu. Or
But he's not aware or consenting. The horse, that was your
No, he
the horse.
consents. No, he consents by attacking some innocent person.
That's not a consent.
It's
You're not
total consent.
consenting to someone attacking
When I am
you.
a criminal, right, and I'm engaging in criminal act, like if I break into somebody's house, like
Sure.
I'm consenting essentially to getting shot
No,
if
you're saying-
someone has a gun in there.
You're saying essentially, but isn't there a regular word for it that's not the word consent? There's like a phrase for it, right? Like
Assumption
of
of risk.
right? That's not a consent. That's an assumption.
It is a
of risk.
consent. It is a
You're not-
form of consent.
It's.
Yes, it is.
I believe you, but I.
No, because like when I go so one of the things that is a famous example is like if I go onto a baseball field, like I go into a little league field, right, and I sit in the stands or even a big league field, and I sit in the stands like next to the foul ball, like right up on the field, like they tell you like pay attention because the ball is going to come at you, and sometimes there's no net. Nowadays they have nets, but if there's no net, you need to be watching the game. Like you need to watch. And if you get smacked in the face because there's a foul ball, you have agreed to that. You have assumed that risk by sitting in that seat at a baseball game.
So if it's a wild horse, right? That horse should assume that at any time.
No, because a wild horse is not a creature with rational capabilities.
It doesn't matter. That wild horse should assume that it could be attacked at any time.
No.
Right? So if I really can choke it, it should understand,
I think
it should have been on
horses-
its P's and Q's. And it shouldn't have let me get on its back in the first place. So I'm going to choke this horse out.
I think you are doing jiu-jitsu, yes.
On that horse. Even though it doesn't consent.
I'm not talking about consent. That was like a joke.
No, I think that's very true.
No,
like,
it's not. If I am using a jiu-jitsu technique, now there are catch wrestling versions of this technique. There are like the rear naked is not unique to jiu-jitsu, right? People have been choking each other all over the world for like as long as there have been people to choke each other, right? With various methods
before
and means.
before jiu-jitsu was a thing.
Probably.
So are you like, would you go?
No, but jiu-jitsu is forever.
Would you retroactively apply or say that they're doing jiu-jitsu like once you recognize that this technique is a jiu-jitsu technique? Like if you saw it on an Egyptian wall, a hieroglyphic of a rear naked choke, you'd be like, oh, he's doing jiu-jitsu. That's amazing. Or would you be like, oh, he's doing what looks to me like a rear naked choke?
I think we're again playing like semantic games.
Yeah.
I think that the choke is the choke is the choke. Whoever applies it at whatever time, it is a choke, and we call it now in our particular era and place and time, we call it jiu-jitsu. But there have been many eras and many times before where people use the choke. They don't call it jiu-jitsu, but jiu-jitsu is more than just the choke.
Yeah.
Right? Like boxing is more than just punching somebody in the face. Right?
So is it like bankruptcy? I just have to like declare it? I'm doing jiu-jitsu.
That's not how bankruptcy works either, but are you asking me like what it is that makes someone like when you like what is it you're getting back to the essence? Are we just switching gears?
Yeah, because it just bothers me.
You already know my answer about the essence of
I just
jiu-jitsu.
like it's frustrating because like you're like, oh, but judo is really similar, right? It has very similar techniques, and it's like but like
Almost the same.
And my argument was like, the rules are similar. Anyway,
I would say here's what I would say about the essence, like what I think is the closest thing about jiu-jitsu, and it's not like I don't think a simple answer, but like I said to you, it's actually as jiu-jitsu right now, like for the last like what we have received, right, from Saint Elio and Saint Carlos, right, and Saint Mitsuyo Maeda,
patron saints of language.
right? Like this is what and Jigoro Kano, right? Like, and it's not the same, right? There's always points of emphasis, right? Even though we come directly from judo and we take a lot of things from other arts, we've appropriated them, and including the rules and approaches to training and all those things. To me, jiu-jitsu is unique in the emphasis that it places on how to use these techniques. You know, for judo today, and probably for a long time, the emphasis overwhelmingly has been throwing the person onto their back.
Mm-hmm.
That is the thing that defines the sine qua non. Non. I don't know how to say the Latins. It's the thing without which.
Isn't that my
Or
argument?
with which.
That's
No.
like,
No, I mean, I don't know if it's your argument. I'll say mine, and then you can decide whether it's also agrees to yours.
sorry.
That we place a particular emphasis on submitting our opponents.
Mm-hmm.
And that is always the most important and highest goal of a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Now, there are other ways to win, right? But the highest articulation or goal of jiu-jitsu is to make another person a resisting person, fully resisting person in any combat situation. Either to disable them, to make them submit, right? Those are the two things. Either you submit or I will disable you, right? I will force you, I will break you, right? Or I'll put you to sleep, right? So that to me is, does that happen in judo? Yes, they also have, Travis Stevens won a silver medal by doing jiu-jitsu in the Olympics, right? Within the rules of judo. So it's a question to me not of absolutes, but rather of points of emphasis, right? Like most judo players, not all, right? There are judo players. I remember seeing one woman, I think from Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic, who, you know, I think that was her, maybe it's somebody else, or somewhere else. You know, she was very good at taking somebody down, not for ippon, but just to get them to sit down almost into a guard. And then she was excellent at passing the guard. This is a judo player. This is in the Olympics. And she would just do this, and if she didn't score ippon, which she almost never did as far as I could see in those Olympics, that was fine. Instead of like letting the person stand up like most judo players will do when they don't hit the ippon, she would like press forward and try to pass. And then you can also win by just passing and holding the person down in judo, right? Oisakome.
Yeah.
So, you know, and sometimes she would choke them, right? Like sometimes they do something foolish and she would choke them. Sometimes they would just sit there and try to escape and she would be able to hold them down. But she was, to me, doing essentially implementing, and Travis too, implementing a fundamentally, in point of emphasis or degree, a jiu-jitsu like kind of strategy. Now, as far as I remember, Travis never like went behind anybody and like rear naked choked them.
Yeah.
But you know, he had loop chokes, I believe, and he may have had an arm lock on somebody. I'd have to go back and watch, but I think he won everything in that Olympics, almost everything, by some form of submission.
So I think the snag that we're hitting, I think I've recognized it, is like, because it's a word thing, a semantic thing, like doing jujitsu, right? Like doing the activity of jujitsu versus doing jujitsu as in doing a verb that
Jiu-jitsu?
you would find in a jujitsu environment, or that you learn from jujitsu, or that someone could be describing a jujitsu technique, right? Because like I would say I could go up to my friend who's laying down in the living room and put them into an armbar, and I'm not doing jujitsu, but I'm doing jujitsu. You know,
maybe this analogy kind of occurs to me where we can speak English to each other, right, or whatever language. But if we talk about Aristotle, right, or we discuss his philosophy, then we are engaging in philosophy in English.
Yeah.
It's the same words. There may be some specialized words and specialized concepts, but we're speaking in English. It's still English, right? But if then we turn and we start talking about repairing cars,
Yes.
we're no longer engaging in philosophy. We are engaging in, no, I just ask you, like, Kevin, if something's wrong with my car, can you diagnose it and tell me what I should do or help me do it? And, you know, guide me through this. Then we are engaging in auto repair, right? We are still speaking the language of English together. But no one would confuse those two things who also spoke English and knew anything about philosophy and auto repair. Okay, so it's kind of almost like a similar idea of like, we share, let me finish, we share a language with a lot of other things, a lot of other grappling and combative arts.
Yes.
Okay? The language itself, the words, some of the words are different and unique.
Yes.
But the language itself, the syntax, you know, the verbs, a lot of the nouns, these are the same regardless of what it is we are speaking about. And so, to me, maybe, as I articulated, Jiu-Jitsu it's a subject within the larger subject. It's like a subcategory in the larger subject area of grappling, of which we share many of the same technical vocabulary, if you will. Like, people have been doing rear naked chokes in judo, in catch wrestling, or even in wrestling, I'm sure.
But then how do you?
But they are still doing what? The same way we would recognize these people are wrestling, these people are doing judo, these people are doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but how do you do it in like a not blurry way?
Well, I don't think there's any clear.
I think the rule set is the clear, definitive.
It's not the.
Because
it may be, but see, the problem with that theory is that there is no one rule set for any of those things.
No, but I'm saying there is some commonalities between all jiu-jitsu rule sets that will be unique, not unique, but characteristic of jiu-jitsu, right? And then you can get into the specifics, like we're doing no-gi grappling that has rules involving not wearing gi. And then you have IBJJF rules, which is a different type of jiu-jitsu, but it's still jiu-jitsu, right? But all jiu-jitsu has to have an essence, a clear definition that is across all things to be jiu-jitsu. And because I think the problem with jiu-jitsu
if all the rule sets change,
finish,
then how can that be the essence?
If the thing with jiu-jitsu is that when we slap hands, bump fists, and start doing jiu-jitsu, we can do an infinite number of things, right? And you can't tell me definitively that those things aren't jiu-jitsu because when we're participating, no, I'm just telling you can't. As like a hypothetical.
I won't.
You couldn't tell me that that's not jiu-jitsu because if I'm trying to do jiu-jitsu, who are you to tell me that I'm not?
What is it that you're doing when you're trying to do jiu-jitsu?
I am trying to stay within the rules of jiu-jitsu, right? And I'm also trying to follow the described way to win the game as defined by the rules of jiu-jitsu, right?
What is
so
the one?
Everything
What
that
are
I
the
do,
ways? What are the ways?
a submission or points that are defined by the rules written down, right? When a dispute happens, where do people look? How to make decisions? They look towards the rules, right? So when I'm playing the game, right, I could have a judo background, but if I'm acting within the confinement of the stated rules, then that determines what I'm doing, right? Even if I'm only pulling guard and armbarring people, if I'm in a judo tournament, I'm doing judo. It's a judo tournament. Like you can say that you did jiu-jitsu techniques. That's true, right? You did techniques you learned in judo or in jiu-jitsu. Great, that's true. You're still doing judo, right? Because the other person across from you is doing judo, right? That's the game. If that person throws you on your back, you can say that you're doing jiu-jitsu, but you lose, right? You're doing judo, sorry, right? And that should affect how you approach the strategy. And no matter what, because you know that the rules will determine what you can and cannot do, that's going to determine your approach. And even if you only have learned jiu-jitsu as a martial art, you are doing judo if the context and the environment is judo, right? The techniques that you use, I'm not saying are only jiu-jitsu, only judo, only wrestling, right? But in the context in which you're moving and acting, that determines whether or not your actions are this or that. If I go to a wrestling tournament, right? Even if I sumigishi someone, right? I'm wrestling. I'm wrestling because maybe my back hit the mat and I lost 2 points, right? I made a strategic decision and there were consequences for it. And even though I did jiu-jitsu techniques, what is happening is wrestling. Because I could lose if I got pinned, I could win if I pinned the other person. Like all that has to be considered, even if the only thing I ever learned was a rear naked choke from Helio Gracie himself.
What if I go to the tournament and let's say I go to a wrestling tournament and I pull guard?
Yeah.
Am I still wrestling?
Yeah.
What if
you're bad? You're wrestling really badly.
Well, if I go to a wrestling tournament and I do jiu-jitsu, right? And I try to guillotine.
What someone would consider to be jiu-jitsu if they were looking at it objectively.
Well, let's say I go to a wrestling tournament and I do a front headlock, which is nobody would ever look at a front headlock and say that is not wrestling. But I actually make it into a choke, which is jiu-jitsu.
Is it legal?
No, it's totally
Oh,
illegal.
then yeah.
What am I doing? Am I wrestling or am I doing jiu-jitsu?
You're not wrestling because what you did was illegal.
So if I go to let's say I go to a jiu-jitsu
If you know
tournament.
what
Let me finish. If I go to a jiu-jitsu tournament and I do something that is legal under one rule set of jiu-jitsu, but is illegal. So I go to an IBJJF tournament and I do heel hook in the gi and I get disqualified.
Yeah.
Am I doing jiu-jitsu?
Not right there.
Yes, I
I
am.
mean, you could say that.
Yes, I am.
You're doing.
I'm just breaking the rules. That's all I'm doing.
You're doing a type of jujitsu, but not the appropriate type. They're still both jujitsu, but like that's not the type that you should be doing. You're supposed to be doing.
It's still jiu-jitsu.
It's still jujitsu, but you're supposed to be doing gi jujitsu. I'm sorry, it's not a jujitsu.
What is gi
tournament.
jujitsu?
No, you're not in a jujitsu tournament. You're in an IBJJF.
So now it's not a jiu-jitsu tournament.
No, it is a jujitsu tournament, but it is specifically a gi jiu-jitsu tournament with this subset of rules. It's all jiu-jitsu, right? But it's a very specific type of jiu-jitsu, right? Like, if you're a person, right? People usually have eyes, nose, face, mouth, ears, etc., etc. But there are
Don't be facialist.
distinguishing characteristics between people,
Yeah.
right? If you look at like DNA, right, which you could consider to be the rules for making people, right? There are commonalities among the DNA, and there are differences, and those differences result in different manifestations of physical expressions in people, right? So the rules are a thing, and then the environment happens, and then out the other end is your product, whatever it is. And right, if you change the DNA of the thing, you're going to change the product. If you change the rules of the tournament, you're going to change the jiu-jitsu that comes out of it. If you change the rules of whatever grappling thing you decide to make, you're going to create a completely new grappling thing.
Were the samurai before any grappling rules were codified in the last 100 years? Were the ancient samurai engaged in doing jiu-jitsu?
Well, that's tricky because language evolves over time, and the meaning of the word can experience a natural evolution. So I could argue that if they believed that they were doing jiu-jitsu and there was like a common culturally accepted idea of what jiu-jitsu was, I would acknowledge that it would be different than the way we conceptualize jiu-jitsu now, and it would be considered true jiu-jitsu by their consideration. Right, because they're the only people alive on Earth. We're not there to say that they're wrong. So if they think that it's
But if you took
they just have a different definition. They wouldn't share my definition for jiu-jitsu. That's for sure.
No, they would think that this
would
was
be
like, they would be puzzled by what we're doing.
Yeah.
Probably. A samurai would be like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think, isn't that why people say Brazilian jiu-jitsu typically? So they don't get.
Well, now people just call it jiu-jitsu.
Well, I like to.
But what about Jigoro Kano? If you could teleport or time travel Jigoro Kano, was he, or whatever, it doesn't have to involve time travel, was he doing jiu-jitsu?
No, he's doing judo.
Well, he studied like 4 different or 5 different types of traditional jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, but he started a judo academy, right?
Like but originally he called it jiu-jitsu.
Sure, but then what happened?
Well, then he changed the name of it.
Okay,
But the name itself is a label. It doesn't.
So what? All right. So how about like?
I mean, that may be the problem too. Is that you're trying to.
It's like a ship of Theseus problem, right? It's a gradual change over time. You can't really decide when exactly the change happened. That's just how That's how words work, right? Same thing with jiu-jitsu. Like when they started fighting in Brazil, they just changed the name to jiu-jitsu because the judo people
The name had always been jiu-jitsu. It was never changed.
No, they were a judo school, and then when they started,
it was called jiu-jitsu.
When they started, no, not the Gracie school, the judo school that they learned from, right? It was a judo school.
Mitsuya Hiatus.
And yes, and then
they
they
went to the jiu-jitsu school.
Are you done? So when they started trying to do the professional fights, they weren't allowed to call it judo, so that's why they made the name change. It wasn't technically any different. That was just what they did. So
At what point does changing the rules make it no longer jiu-jitsu?
Is that Cameron?
Yeah, he said this is a ship of Theseus problem.
I just said that.
You just said that. Are you guys like mind melding or something? I'm worried for you, Cameron. At what point? Wait a minute.
I would say if we can accept one defining characteristic or a couple defining characteristics of all jiu-jitsu, right? I would say the tap and the submission, right? When a person taps, you let go.
What's a submission?
And the way to win is to submit the person, right? Those are the two main rules, right? The one rule is only really like a cultural thing, but the main rule is you make the person submit and you win. If the sport were to divert from that,
That's what I just said.
yeah, then it would
That's
be
what I
not
said.
jiu-jitsu. Okay, yeah, then, yeah, I agree with you. Sorry.
I mean, because you can win those ways in judo.
Yeah,
You can make somebody tap in judo
yeah.
almost forever, right? Even though the emphasis has always been,
But once
by and large, on throwing.
Yeah.
I mean, even judo had a school, they had Kozen, and they had other schools and other people who were like, no, we think the ground is at least good enough for us to beat you. The people who are more emphasizing throwing, right? So you can tap somebody. Like I can go to judo. I can go to a judo school or a judo tournament,
Yeah.
and I can do a modified version of jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
right? And tap people, and they're not going to be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
They might be annoyed with me because I'm not actually trying to throw
Because
them.
you're not doing real judo.
Well, I mean, they might say that, right? In the same way that someone could come in here with a judo background,
Yeah.
and then just try to
Yeah.
throw you and hold you down in katagatame for 5 minutes.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that.
And
they're
say
not-
like, hey, if this had been a judo, like we know these people, right? Hey, if this had been a judo match, I would have won.
Great. Okay. If
Right?
I had.
But we
wheels
know
that
the
might-
difference, right? Almost by the approach of the person, like how they approach the situation. Like you can have a wrestler,
Yeah.
and the wrestler will. What are they going to do? They're going to come in here. They're going to double leg you, and they're going to try to pin you. And if they know anything that causes pain in wrestling, and there's a lot of things you can learn in wrestling that cause pain that are not submissions, like everything in wrestling, I think causes
Jiu-jitsu has
pain.
that.
No. But what I'm saying is that they will come in, and you see this in Naga, right? You see guys or kids that are primarily wrestlers, and you know it immediately by just looking at them, by how their stance is,
Yeah.
right? You just immediately know this kid's in a low crouch. He has a wrestling background, because that's not how jiu-jitsu works. I mean, the low crouch in jiu-jitsu is like it's almost like a Spider-Man crouch. It's like this,
Yeah.
right, where your back is up, whereas a wrestler is going to be more, kind of hunched over,
Yeah.
and you just know from the stance and kind of the movement, which are two fundamentals
Jiu-jitsu people keep better posture.
of wrestling. Yeah, because you don't want to get snapped down, you don't want to get guillotined.
Yeah.
Whereas in wrestling, they're not worried about getting choked as much
Yeah.
until they come into a jiu-jitsu school. But you would know that person is going to come in, they're going to try to double, single, whatever their favorite takedown is,
So
and they're going to try to pin you.
So is your argument like jiu-jitsu is that you know it when you see it?
No, my argument is still essentially the same, which is it's a point of emphasis. It's how we go about what we do. It's not, it's...
But you can't like describe that really concretely, right? And like in good terms, right? Like the way
I would
people
say
do
that
stuff.
I would say that the goal of jiu-jitsu, right? The primary goal of jiu-jitsu is to submit the other person, right? That is the primary goal, or disable them.
Yeah.
That's your goal. That's everything that we do revolves around that goal. Everything, or it should, in my mind, right? I mean, I'm going to be normative. I'm going to say it should. If someone said to me, Rich, I want you to teach me jiu-jitsu. Will you teach me how to do a sweep?
Oh, I have a question.
Let me finish, and then you can have your question. I would say what I want to teach you is how to get into a position where you can choke the other person out. You can put them to sleep, or or break their arm or some other part of their body, so they can no longer continue to fight. If you went to a judo tournament or a judo school and you said, "Hey, I really want to learn judo. What are you going to throw? Are you going to show me?" They're going to say, "We're going to show you how to throw somebody on their back, right? And you're going to show you how to ippon." Now, other places, I mean, if you go deep enough into judo, eventually you'll learn some groundwork, and they're moving towards more submission-based type of stuff. But the goal, in wrestling, the goal is going to be, I'm going to take the person down, I'm going to try to pin them, right? Like that's.
But
that's the goal.
If you go to a jiu-jitsu academy whose focus is playing the points game, is that not jiu-jitsu?
That's not good jiu-jitsu.
It's not real jiu-jitsu.
No, I didn't say it wasn't real. It is real. I mean, those guys are awesome.
Well, it's good.
But
how
even
is it not good if they're
But
winning?
even those guys, if you went in, even to the sportiest of sport jiu-jitsu schools, and you said, what is it that you want to do? Like, what is your real goal? You'll say, I want to submit people.
Yeah, but you can tell what they really want to do by the tournaments that they participate in. If you go to IBJJF, it's point, and you're a point school, you're going to go, and you're
Yeah, but you
occupy
look
that
at some of
niche.
if you look, for example, at, let's think about guys who've never done anything else, right? Then, that's not true.
Then what?
I'm trying to think. First of all, there are very few people who are just IBJJF gi competitors.
So you're saying that there's some that exist?
There probably are, but there are people who are better than they're better in the gi or better without the gi.
Yeah, but there are definitely some.
The high level guys, I think, they do everything.
Yeah, we're not talking about those guys. We're talking about the people that only.
Oh yeah, there's lots of people who are. I mean, we have people here that are like, I'll never put the gi on, and other people are like, I'll always keep my gi on.
Are they
right?
not real no-gi graphics?
I think that they are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe a slightly different point, but I think that you should, just as much as we're always, regardless of the situation, I think fundamentally jiu-jitsu is focused on submission.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't matter whether you have a gi on or the other person has a gi on or pants or a t-shirt or whatever, they're on the beach, like you should be able to, ideally, jiu-jitsu should be something that no matter what the situation is, like in sort of one-on-one, unarmed combat, you should be able to do what you want to do, whether or not the person has a gi on or not.
Yeah, but we're talking about.
Or you have a gi on.
You were talking about earlier, like setting goals, right, and how to kind of plan your route to getting better at jiu-jitsu. And so, like, there are some people out there who, they set the goal to where, like, hey, I don't have time to be good at everything,
Yes.
so I'm just going to focus on.
Like Gordon Ryan, he doesn't compete in gi tournaments, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's good in the gi. I've seen him train in the gi. He's good at jiu-jitsu,
aggressive.
so he's going to be able to do whatever he wants to most
Yeah.
people. Gi, no gi, wrestler, no, not judo player.
But then, like,
Because jiu-jitsu is the best. and everyone
with
knows
someone
that.
like Helio, who thought that the gi was a defining trait of jiu-jitsu, could someone like Helio say that Gordon Ryan's not doing real jiu-jitsu?
I mean, probably, no, well, maybe, because Elio would say all sorts of crazy stuff. But,
I mean, would he be correct to say?
I mean, you probably get a very different answer from Elio Gracie than you're going to get from me.
Yeah.
I mean, who am I to, if you could commune with the ghost of Elio Gracie, then let me know. I want to be on that call.
Yeah.
But we might need to learn Portuguese. Anyway.
Is there anything?
I'm just saying, like, well, I mean, the gi people, or the people who are more focused on sport point jiu-jitsu, they still are looking for submissions, like.
Yeah, but not as much. I feel like, because you approach your training, right? If you're like, okay, your positional sparring sounds like, okay, both guys have half a point and one penalty. You're starting from guard, one person has a collar. That's a very specific type of training.
Here's the thing: when you're dealing with other people who are training just as hard as you, I think you get to the point where being able to submit them is not always. Well, I mean, just like it doesn't matter, right? Like there's any time in a jiu-jitsu tournament, you may run into somebody who you will not be able to submit.
Sure.
For whatever, maybe you got injured, maybe you're tired, maybe this person has like the perfect counter game to whatever, even though you're better.
So do you stop trying?
Some people, well, like I can think of specific examples, like, somebody like Rafa Mendes, who is one of the pointiest of point fighters, right? Like, I think that's not unfair. He is still constantly going for submissions.
Yeah.
So, and like the one example that just pops into my mind, and I shouldn't say he's the pointiest point fighters. He will submit anybody,
Yeah.
but he racks up points first. He will rack up points on you. And if you're one of the meows,
Yeah.
and your guard can't be passed because you just have such a flexible, and you're so fundamentally good that, what distinguishes the champions in many instances at that level is the ability to score and or not be scored on in those instances where you can't get, like the thing with, when Hoffa runs into Cobrinha, why is that an exciting match? Because they are both going for submissions.
Yeah.
And why does a submission happen? Because they are both going for submissions. When you see some of these matches where the guys are like, stuck in 50-50 for the whole match, it's not because one person doesn't want to do it, doesn't want to have submissions, because the other person's like, I'm going to try to lock you down and turn this match into like a grindy, trench warfare where we find out who can get up in 50-50 in the last 2 seconds of the match for the win, right? And that's a decision that usually one or both are involved in.
Yeah.
But, I shouldn't have said Hoffa, because he will tap you out, right? Like, there is no question in my mind that he went to every match, but with the full intent of like breaking that person off,
Yeah.
right, and making them submit.
But they give themselves a buffer zone of points. Like, At least
if they can.
in my experience, the Yato strategy was always like get at least 5 points under your belt, and then you can start trying to submit.
I mean, that's a wise competitive strategy, because if I've seen, I mean, everybody's seen these matches where the person is like dominating the match, and they're just like, they're passing and they're like on the back, but they can never make that lap. They can't hold the pass. They can't make that second hook. They throw somebody and they can't hold the person down the way that you need to for 3 full seconds.
Yeah.
And they wind up getting 6 advantages,
Yeah.
right? And if to an outside observer, they are kicking that dude's ass.
Yeah.
They are just running circles around. But
And
they
the guy gets a
advantage, and then the guy gets up in the last second and gets a sweep.
Yeah.
2 points, match over, he wins or she wins. And that is a deeply, I think, to an outside observer, and even to some people who are inside observers, a deeply dissatisfying result.
Who do you think was the better competitor in that case?
The person who wins. Who's better at jiu-jitsu? Well, it always begs the question of like, was that actually a conscious strategy by the person who, was the person on the bottom, or
Prove it wasn't.
were they sandbagging, or did they just like?
I mean, a lot of the people are really good at like just getting close enough to that point and just denying it enough to where you burn all that energy.
Yes.
And
I
then,
mean, there's a skill to that too, right? I can't take anything away from that person. They're winning the match. If you can win that way, I mean,
more power.
God bless you. I don't think that's a great. Who was really good at that was like Hodger Gracie. Hodger Gracie, against some people, like he was in deep trouble in the beginning of matches.
Yeah.
And the person would be like very excited because they were almost submitting Hodger Gracie, or they almost had a dominant position, or had a dominant position on Hodger Gracie, and they would get a little too excited and burn out, and then, oh shit, there's still 5 minutes left of this match, and now Hodger Gracie's on top of you.
Yeah.
And now, like, you realize the error of your ways, I mean, that's kind of like Buchecha in the last match of Hodger's, where he's like spending the first like 10 minutes just trying to take Hodger down, getting super tired, and Hodger did that intentionally. I watched this long interview with Hodger. He was like, my strategy, not just in that match, but in other matches, was like, just get him tired.
This is why I sit guard.
Hmm?
This is why I sit guard.
Anyway.
You can't make me get tired if I'm already sitting.
Well, I mean, he would have a different strategy with you. He would grind you into dust.
Yeah.
Because if you pull guard against some of these guys,
But
they're just gonna like.
I wouldn't be tired though. I would just be really well rested dust.
You would be. I mean, you would either get passed or you'd be tired.
Or dust. I'm fine.
Or you would be
Dust.
tired and then you get. Well, trust me, you would get tired and then you'd be passed, and then you would be.
Probably.
You probably say like, man, I should not have pulled guard on Hodger Gracie.
I mean, what else am I gonna do? Honestly.
Yeah, you're doomed pretty much no matter what.
It's like might as well do whatever because it's any object or any.
As tall as you think about this is probably, you don't see this very often. A guy who's taller than you,
Yeah, but
who has a better guard than you.
any sort of logical strategy will be a bad idea. So you have to just be an agent of chaos in that situation.
The only guy who I've ever actually seen give Hodger a lot of trouble. I mean, well, Buchecha gave him trouble in the Metamoris match, but Marcelo gave him a lot of trouble in their team match at the World's Absolute.
Yeah.
I mean, if that had been a no time limit match, I mean, probably Hodger would have approached it differently. Marcelo was giving as good as he got. I mean, it was an eye opening thing because you're like, oh, Hodger's gonna like murder this poor little guy, and Marcelo's like,
No.
that's why Marcelo. I love them both, but don't make me choose. All right, guys, have a great weekend. Hope we got.